Welcome back to the channel. This will be the transfer tips for Gameweek 36. We are approaching the final game weeks of the season, of course, and we don't have a double game week coming up because it has been announced that Aston Villa versus Tottenham Hotspur will take place in Gameweek 37 still, but they have changed the date. As you can see on screen, it was reported by Matt Law a few hours ago, and he said Aston Villa versus Spurs will be moved to Friday, the 16th of May at 7:30 p.m. kickoff. That means Spurs and Man United will have the same preparation time for a Europa League final should they both get there. And the Premier League announcement has been confirmed, and Aston Villa and Tottenham Hotspur have both communicated that to their supporters as well. So we are not getting any double game weeks or blanks. That is all set in stone now. Every single game week coming up will be a single normal game week. And let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I know there's a lot of different opinions about this. One side, the Aston Villa fans are kind of furious, and on the other, the Spurs fans are happier, of course, because it does help them in their quest of winning the Europa League. But it's focusing on FPL specifically. I'll be highlighting 11 players to buy, hold, sell, and skip, with a 1 week punt thrown in there as well if he starts, which will be a very interesting pick there, to say the least. But let's get straight into this video and podcast. Show support to the channel. We are closing in on 33,000 subscribers. By the time this video is published, we might have achieved that goal already. So thank you very much for your support. It is massively appreciated. And check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. All the likes, shares, comments, all of that pushes us in the algorithm. And if you hit that notification bell, you don't miss a single upload live stream, both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The most transferred in player is Kevin De Bruyne, and with good reason. He faces Southampton away next, followed up by Bournemouth at home and Fulham away. He has started the last 5 Premier League matches, getting 2 goals and 1 assist in that time frame, as well as 2 double-digit returns. He got 11 points against Wolves last Friday in the opening game of Gameweek 35. He has 4 goals and 9 fantasy assists for the season, 14 big chance created, and 107 FPL points, and his ownership will soon reach double figures. It is currently at 9.5%. The same goes for his price tag at 9.5 million, and I would expect that to rise before the deadline. All his stats are fairly decent considering he's only played 25 games this season, with 7 big chances, 51 key passes. The expected assist is 5.77, and he has 49 shots overall, so he's averaging 2 per game essentially. I think Kevin De Bruyne is the best Man City asset right now, with Marmoush possibly being a doubt there, with Erling Haaland knocking on the door. He was in the squad on Friday night but didn't play a single minute, but there could be rotation there in the coming weeks, whilst Kevin De Bruyne is playing as the false 9, pushing the Egyptian to the right, and that hasn't really boded well there for Marmoush. But I think Kevin De Bruyne is a very enticing asset, and despite the fact that his ownership is creeping up, it is still going to be a relative differential of sorts, and it was a slight regret of mine not buying him for Gameweek 35, and it's a great captaincy option against Southampton away. So I think Kevin De Bruyne is an absolute purchase. Buying Chris Wood is entirely a fixtures kind of thing because his form has been lacking. He has only scored against Tottenham Hotspur in recent game weeks, but facing Leicester at home next, followed up by West Ham away and Chelsea at home, I could see him scoring in 2 of the next 3 matches, and whenever that happens, he has a great chance of getting bonus points, and I think Chris Wood has a high ceiling as a result. He can easily give you 8 to 9 points, and if he can combine that with an assist or maybe score a brace, then I think that takes him up to another level, and he's one of the best forwards in the game. He had a terrific first half of this campaign, then he has kind of faded out towards the end of the season, and Nottingham Forest have also struggled for that consistency, but they still have a great chance of finishing in the top 5 to qualify for the Champions League next season, and I still think it's worth doubling or tripling up on Nottingham Forest, but I'm certainly less keen now because of their recent form. And Chris Wood has 19 goals, 3 assists, 39 bonus points, which can only be bettered by the likes of Mateus Cunha, and 188 FPL points. I think he'll reach 200 plus, and it'll be very difficult for him to better this next season, but his ownership is still going up slightly. It's currently 28.7%, and his price tag is still very accessible at 7 million, and his stats are decent overall, nothing spectacular. 23 big chances, the XG is 11.68, and 19 key passes, but his finishing has been terrific this season, and I think Chris Wood is an outstanding buy. Despite scoring the winning goal against Arsenal and getting a bonus point, Evanescence only produced 6 points because he also got booked in that game, but he has 10 goals and 5 assists this season to mark a very impressive debut campaign in the Premier League with 21 big chances, 122 FPL points, and the fixtures are quite mixed bag to be fair, but I think Evanescence can score against all of these upcoming opponents, especially Leicester at home in Gameweek 38, and I think it's worthwhile keeping these Bournemouth assets for that Gameweek specifically. But Evanescence did score against Aston Villa earlier this season and also against Man City in the FA Cup fairly recently. He is a mega differential with 3.7% ownership, and despite the fact that Cunha, Vissa and Chris Wood are more enticing, if you are looking for those kind of low-owned differentials with a high ceiling, I think Evanescence is a great option there, and whilst he won't match those players in terms of getting double-digit returns consistently, he can get goals and assists in most matches, and despite the fixtures not looking that appealing, I still think the Brazilian can match the others more often than not, especially in Gameweek 38, but I'd recommend him if you are looking to go differential in the forward position, and whilst Vissa would be my top recommendation, as stated last week, I think Evanescence is an astute purchase. Ever since blank Gameweek 29, Mohamed Salah only has 1 Premier League goal, which is maybe quite surprising, you could say, considering how he started this campaign, but it is a pattern we have seen in recent seasons where he starts off on a very high level, getting goals and assists in virtually every single game, and this year, of course, he was absolutely on another level, but he has failed to replicate that in the second half of the campaign, but that wasn't needed as Liverpool clinched the title several weeks ago. And now they will rotate, and they have some kind of mixed bag fixtures facing Arsenal at home, Brighton away, and Crystal Palace at home. But I think Salah is a great captaincy option for Gameweek 38, and even against Arsenal, I think he can have a very high ceiling there. He has a great record against the Big Six and also against the Gunners. He scores in virtually every single game at Anfield. He has 28 goals, 18 fantasy assists. The XGI is 31.83. and 330 FPL points is a record, and if you can get to 350, that'll be very difficult for any player to reach or even beat in the years to come. His ownership is still tremendously high at 70.5%. However, he is one of the most transferred out players at this point of the game week. In fact, only Bukayo Saka has been transferred out by more FPL managers, and in my opinion, that could be a big mistake. But I do understand the temptation to go different and sell these really high-owned players like Salah and Isak and go in a different direction. So I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I do think that his high ceiling can punish sellers, and you can find the differentials in other areas whilst maintaining Salah in your setup. So in my opinion, the Egyptian is a hold. The same applies to Marmoush, who for me has been a very decent signing for Man City, but in the recent games, he has been shifted to the right-hand side to accommodate De Bruyne in the false 9 position, and we have seen a downturn in form for the Egyptian. But he has 6 goals and 1 assist in the Premier League with 38 shots and 62 FPL points. Southampton away makes him a very enticing captaincy option, but will Erling Haaland take minutes off him or even start the game? That is going to be a potential concern, but the Norwegian didn't play a single minute, and he was on the bench as an unused substitute against Wolves in that 1-0 victory, whilst Marmoush continually gets 80 to 90 minutes of game time in the last 6 match days actually. So I think Marmoush is worth holding on to for now, and we might even get a leak or any kind of inside information suggesting that Haaland or Marmoush start. They could coexist together based on Marmoush's recent positioning on the right-hand side, but if we get the information that Marmoush is on the bench, then he turns into a sell, and you can go for Vissa, Evanescence, Chris Wood and Cunha. Those would be the standouts, not to mention Isak, who is still one of the best forwards in the game. But as things stand, I would hold on to Marmoush, who has decent underlying numbers in general, especially with the shot volume, and he has a very high ceiling against Southampton away. Alexander Isak is one of the best forwards in Europe, but his recent form hasn't been great, particularly from open play. In the last 2 game weeks, he has scored 2 goals, but both were from the penalty spot, and even Eddie Howe admitted that Isak isn't at his absolute best version at this moment in time. He does have some quite poor fixtures on paper, facing Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, and Everton at home, but I still think Isak can score in 2 or 3 of those matches and potentially get a massive ceiling in one of those games. I'm looking at Everton at home specifically there, but Isak is fixture proof, and he has scored against his upcoming opponents Chelsea and Arsenal multiple times this season. He has 23 goals, 6 assists, an XGI figure of 19.83 and 207 FPL points. His ownership is 62%, so I understand your temptation to go away from these massively template picks and go differential, and I think Visser is the best forward in FPL at this moment in time, but Isak is still right up there with a very high ceiling, and you can keep him whilst buying differentials to partner him in that forward position. So I still think he's one of the best forwards in the game, and even across all positions, he is still one of the best FPL assets you can find. But he has been overshadowed by Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes since Game Week 30, but he scored that late equaliser against Brighton in Game Week 35 in the dying embers of that game. So I do think Isak has that really high ceiling. With just one goal, he can give you 8 to 9 points very easily, and his ceiling is always very high. I would keep Alexander Isak personally. His stats are absolutely sensational. 36 big chances, 11 big chance created, and 42 key passes, with 92 shots overall, and 78 of them are inside the box. I think Isak is definitely a hold right now, and I don't see myself selling him from now until the end of the season. Over the last 5 game weeks, Elanga only has 1 assist, which came against Tottenham Hotspur, and he has been very frustrating. He was in terrific form in blank Game Week 29. He did really well against Ipswich Town, scoring his first ever brace in his career. Then he followed that up with another double-digit haul against Man United. And then in Game Week 31 against Aston Villa, he was subbed up for half-time due to an injury, which wasn't too serious, but I think that halted his momentum, and now people are kind of put off Elanga and most Nottingham Forest assets, as their form has been very shaky overall in recent weeks. But it's Leicester at home next. I think Chris Wood and Elanga have a very high ceiling in this fixture. The same goes for Gibbs White. They're all worthwhile additions to your FPL squad. And defensively, you've got Milenkovic, Aina, Nico Williams, and even Murillo, who chipped in with a goal against Crystal Palace in Game Week 35. Not to mention Sells, who's been one of the best goalkeepers in Fantasy Premier League this season. But my favourite options from Nottingham Forest remain Chris Wood, Milenkovic, and Sells overall. And Elanga is still in that top 5 list. But for those that have him, I still think he's worth holding in most situations. But I understand the temptation to go to Jarrod Bowen, Brian Mbeumo, and all these other midfielders who might be more expensive but have a much higher ceiling in the process. If you can go to one of those players, I would recommend it, and that would mean selling Elanga. But otherwise, at a similar price and below, I would keep Elanga for this fixture, and the timing can be completely off if you decide to sell the Swede. This is a classic case of form versus fixtures, because Jacob Murphy has shown much more promise than Elanga in the last few game weeks, with multiple goals and assists in that time frame, but his minutes are all over the place right now, and that was still the case, to be fair, when I bought him around Game Week 30 on the wild card. And with Anthony Gordon coming on as a substitute for Jacob Murphy, we are seeing him being subbed off really early, and that's something you don't want to see even for a budget midfielder like Murphy there. He is getting off around 55 to 65 minutes in recent weeks, and that's something you can't really afford to stomach too often. If he gets early returns, that's all fine and rosy, but that's not always going to be the case. And the next 3 fixtures are quite mixed bag. If you already have Isak up front, or perhaps you've got Harvey Barnes, it's definitely worth trimming down your Newcastle coverage in those attacking areas. But Isak will still have the minutes and the penalties over Jacob Murphy, and that's why for the captaincy, I would favour him more often than not. But Murphy has 8 goals, 12 fantasy assists, only 15 shots on target, and 150 FPL points, so he averages close to 5 points per game. He has been a tremendous signing for me on the Game Week 30 wildcard, but if you can go from Murphy to Bowen or Mbeumo, that would be highly recommended, and there is a slight regret of mine to not take that -4 hit and buy Jarrod Bowen as well. That would have been a game changer for me in Game Week 35. But Murphy is still worth holding in some scenarios. I don't think he's a must-sell or a priority, but I think in the midfield, with his ownership being quite high as well, you could go differential in this position, and even Jarrod Bowen has significantly lower ownership than Jacob Murphy, so I would recommend making a change in this position. Luis Diaz had returned in 6 out of 7 game weeks before not featuring at all against Chelsea in that 3-1 defeat, and I recommended him recently as a 1-week punt for blank Game Week 34 on the free hit or as part of your normal transfers. But with Liverpool securing the title, you will expect a lot of rotation now, and Diaz will be one of those that won't start in 2 out of the next 3 games. I mean, that is a possibility, but I certainly wouldn't expect 3 out of 3 starts, and you can go to different midfielders like Mbeumo, Jarrod Bowen, and those discussed in recent wildcard videos. That is what you want to do in this position. He can score against Arsenal, Brighton and Crystal Palace, maybe get an assist on top of it, but I think it's probably worth making a change in this position and going to players with better fixtures, more to play for, and a higher ceiling because of the expected minutes being significantly higher as well. But Diaz has 12 goals, 7 fantasy assists, 54 key passes, and 172 FPL points. His ownership is 18.1%. He started this season on fire and was actually bettering Mohamed Salah. Then that changed quickly. Of course, we know how that transpired. But Diaz has been a solid option for Liverpool this season, and all his stats are fairly decent with 21 big chances as well. I think he'll start against Arsenal, and he can do very well against the Gunners. But I'd rather go to Jarrod Bowen, Mbeumo, and the other midfielders I've discussed in recent videos for the transfer tips and the wildcard podcasts. Kevin Schade has produced returns in the last 2 game weeks, and he has a very high ceiling. We have seen that earlier this season when he scored a hat-trick, and 10 goals, 4 assists is fairly decent for a budget midfielder with 1% ownership. 18 big chances is also fairly sustainable as well. 134 FPL points. You've got Ipswich Town away next, but he has blanked in 26 Premier League matches this season. I think Mbeumo and Wissa is the duo you really want to focus on in that Brentford team, and that will have low effective ownership, relatively speaking, and that's what I'd recommend to most managers watching. I wouldn't go for Kevin Schade personally, and at that price, I'd rather go to Elanga for the next couple of game weeks. You've also got Jacob Murphy with a form. I'd still rank him higher than Kevin Schade, particularly for Game Week 38, but I do understand if you want to go differential and you think Kevin Schade's high ceiling could result in one huge return coming up. He can get 2 goals in a game, maybe a goal and an assist, and produce 10 plus points in the process. I think he is capable of doing that in 1 game week, but in my opinion, he could end up blanking in 2 out of the next 3 matches, and you can find much better value and consistency from the other options. But at this stage of the season, it's not really about consistency. I do get that, but ultimately you still want that kind of guarantee or confidence in a player to produce the returns when you most need it to win your mini leagues and rise up the rankings. I need to caveat this by saying that Erling Haaland might not start against Southampton because he didn't even play a single minute against Wolves despite being on the bench, so there's no guarantee he'll get significant game time here. But against Southampton away, even off the bench, he could score a goal or 2 and make a massive impact and help you win your mini league or just go up the rankings and get those green arrows to wrap up this season. There could be rotation between him and Marmoush, but they can also coexist in the same squad because, as discussed earlier, the Egyptian is playing on the right-hand side to accommodate De Bruyne as the false 9, and all 3 of them can play in the same starting lineup. But we also have the FA Cup final to think about in Game Week 37. Erling Haaland has 21 goals, 3 assists, 39 big chances, and 171 FPL points. His ownership is still quite high at 22.1%, but all those would be kind of dead teams and those that haven't really played FPL in quite a while. And all his stats are very impressive with the goal scoring. His XG is 20.82, which is higher than Alexander Isak. He has also accumulated 102 shots, so the stats are sustainable, and even with limited game time, he can make an immediate impact off the bench. But this is a typical case of a high-risk, high-reward scenario. He is very expensive, so I'd only go for this sort of pick if you want to go differential and maybe break away from the template, going for your own sort of individual plays. I do think he'll get game time against Southampton, but as a substitute or a starter, that remains to be seen. And the FA Cup final will also play a big part in Pep Guardiola's team selection. We are approaching the end of this transfer list video for Game Week 36, and you can see the most transferred in players on screen. I'll then show you the most transferred out players so you can compare and give your thoughts on what people are doing with their FPL squads. So De Bruyne, Gvardiol, Mbeumo, Wissa and Chris Wood are the top 5 most transferred in players at this point of the game week. You've also got Cunha, Aït-Nouri, Bowen, Schade, Elanga, Marmoush, Sells, Ruben Dias, Collins, Milenkovic, Palmer, Aina, Flecken, Gibbs-White and Bruno Fernandes, who all have significant transfers in. With the transfers out, we've got Bukayo Saka, Salah, Murphy, Diaz and Mateta in the top 5, followed up by Strand Larsen, who missed Game Week 35 entirely, Isak, Marmoush, Bruno Fernandes, Timber, Saliba, Rashford, Raya, Joao Pedro, Watkins, Palmer, Barnes, Munoz, Rodgers and Matoma. So only a handful of them intersect, so they have a lot of transfers in and transfers out, mainly Cole Palmer and Bruno Fernandes. They are 2 of the standouts there, but as you can see, some of the players who are being transferred out in droves, like Salah and Diaz, for example, I mean, they can do very well in Game Week 36, as mentioned before, but I do understand the Diaz pick and him being sold. But with Salah, I think that could be a massive mistake, to be quite honest with you. But we all have our different opinions, and our situations will differ in terms of remaining chips, money in the bank, and also our goals for the rest of the season, the ranks we're at, and also where we're standing in our mini leagues. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let's continue the conversation, not just there, but also across all my social media platforms, which can be found in the description. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you know when I upload a live stream, both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check my Patreon, the Championships, Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify. Those are all found in the description. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 36 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you on Saturday for another deadline stream.